Welcome everyone to this bonus episode of the Antinatalist Advocacy podcast, where we speak with interesting and knowledgeable people about how best to protect sentient beings from the harms of coming into existence. I am your host, John, an antinatalist advocate from the UK, and I'm delighted that you could join us for today's episode. For today's bonus episode, we're bringing you the audio of another live stream posted on Lawrence's channel titled How to Build a Healthier Antinatalist Community. It's been clear to me for as long as I've been engaging in this space that many people are unhappy with the state of the antinatalist community, and I think it's easy to see why. We're an almost exclusively online community with great disagreement over really important topics, which is why it's hardly surprising that so many people are concerned about the amount of infighting along with other issues. That's why we've dedicated quite a large proportion of our focus at AA towards building a healthier antinatalist community. We held a panel at last year's conference on this topic, which you can find linked in the description, and it was this discussion that inspired us to create this list of 10 suggestions that we'll be going through in today's episode. You can also find this list written out in full as a resource on our website. Please let us know your thoughts on this list in the description. Anyway, without further ado, I bring you this bonus episode of the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast with Lawrence and Tom. Enjoy.
Okay, so welcome to another live stream. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm just going to check we are actually, and we are, the professionalism of it. Cool. So I am joined by John. Hello, John. And yeah, so in this stream, we're going to be going over basically 10 sort of suggestions for how to build a healthier antinatalist community. It's inspired by the panel on the same topic, which was part of the Antinatalist Advocacy Conference at the end of last year that John hosted. And it's sort of it's a follow-up to that, and it's sort of an amalgamation of points raised on that panel, reflections we've had, and we just want to put it out there to hopefully... It's going to be something that ultimately we have on the website, and it's something that we also want to get people's feedback on. So if you have any feedback or comments, then please send a super chat. We probably won't be keeping up with the chat itself, so if you want to send a super chat, we will see that. But also the contact us page on the Antinatalist Advocacy website, you can find a link in the description to the website. Contact us page is very clear on there. Do you have any intro, John, before I continue?
No, just say thank you for having me on again, mate. And also maybe we should say a quick thank you to Amanda, Ash, and Rita, who were on the panel in November. Thought it was a great discussion. It'd be great if we could link that discussion, obviously, in the when this is published. I thought it was really fruitful, and we've come up with some takeaways, as you were saying.
Nice. So once this is finished, all of the links, the relevant links, will be in the description. Before we get into things, I wanted to quickly touch a bit on why, and we've kind of mentioned it elsewhere as well, but why we chose to have that panel in the first place, why we're doing this follow-up. And the basic context to it is antinatalism is becoming more known. There are more people becoming attracted to it. At the moment, the vast majority of interactions people have around antinatalism are online. It's sometimes referred to as a community. I've sometimes referred to it as a community. Whether or not I would consider it a community, I don't know if I could consider it a genuine community. It's more sort of like a sort of scattered but also somewhat coalesced, loose sort of network of people that sometimes interact with each other, but vast majority of it online. Although there are some, growing in-person constituents or constituencies, which is good. And I think antinatalism is heading in the direction where it will become more of a community. There will be more people interested in it and wanting to interact with each other and organize around it. And as a result, it's a good time, not just for us, but all antinatalists to think about, what are the norms and behaviors we want to encourage in the community that will presumably take form. Do you think that's a decent enough intro, John? Do you have any more context to add?
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually something that I hadn't considered for the purpose of this discussion, but I think is generally true. And that is that I think we can reasonably expect the antinatalist community to grow in the coming years. There's a ton of data to suggest that people's mindsets shift after making a behavior change. And we know that being child-free, refraining from having children, is on the rise in lots of places around the world. And so we can reasonably expect people to, having made the behavior shift, be more open to ideas that align with that behavior, such as antinatalism. So, and also just with the rise of the internet and more and more content, I think just anecdotally, I've seen a lot of stuff coming out over the past few years. So yeah, I think now is a really good time to consider, if you don't think that we have a community yet, and I kind of view it as a bit of a, like when does a puddle become a pond?
Yeah.
Scenario in terms of number of engagement, but also behaviors as well, and what unites us and what doesn't. But yeah, I think now would be as good a time as ever to kind of think about what kind of norms we'd like to see in a community, if we don't already have one.
So I have a quick little update and sort of / announcement for people, and then John does as well. So I'll hand over to John in a second. The first thing I wanted to say is that we've got 2 new pages on, even though this is being streamed on my channel, but obviously, this is from the Antinatalist Advocacy Conference, so we'll be referencing AA. And on the website, there are 2 new pages that we have just today, finalized and published. And those are the criticisms page, which I know a couple of people have been waiting for. So that is finally on there, and that will be changed over time as different things come up. And also, we finally got the careers page on there as well. So if you're interested in seeing or getting a sort of intro into, resources and materials that are out there and information that's out there that can help you get into a career where you will be doing more good in the world, and also you can potentially get into a job role that will help, prevent new beings from coming into existence in some ways, then definitely check out the careers page. Again, a link for that will be in the description. I'll add it once we finish the stream. Definitely. Very quickly before I hand over to you, John, we have just had the first super chat, so I was going to quickly read that out.
Sure.
And then I'll hand over to you. So, Bovine Blue Stocking, first of all, thank you for watching and thank you so much for the support. Has said, sorry, can't stay, but please tell John it was that panel at the conference that encouraged me to join your supporter community, as in my supporter community. Oh, great. So thanks, I guess. So
hang on, what you're saying is the panel has ended up in more money going in your pocket. How is that something? How is that fair?
No, Bovine. Well, first of all, before anyone takes that the wrong way, obviously all the money goes to covering costs and helping the channel and stuff like that. But also, Bovine Blue Stocking has become a valuable member of the supporter community. So, and she adds a lot of value to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I'm glad you found the panel helpful. Again, I really enjoyed it, so it's always nice to hear positive feedback.
100%. John, do you want to quickly give your announcement, and then we can get into the 10 suggestions?
Yes, and if this isn't just delaying things further, there is one thing I wanted to say about the careers page. One thing that we've consistently done, as you'll know from if you've been on our website, is to refer to resources and organizations out there who are kind of doing direct work. Lawrence and I aren't claiming to be the experts or the the real difference makers on the ground, if you like. We're just kind of setting up our website and really AA in general to try and signpost to experts in different fields. We've kind of like cobbled it all together, but we're signposting to the experts, and this very much is the case with the careers section. There are numerous career services that we think are particularly helpful or valuable, or that we have found personally quite helpful. And it can align with antinatalism depending on like the careers options that you go down that align with antinatalism. So we think these are great resources, and just to say that the careers page is signposting to those resources rather than me and Lawrence, who are not qualified career advisors, giving our 2 pence necessarily.
Yeah. And just very quickly on that, if anyone knows of more resources that align with the sort of stuff that's already on the careers page and John and I have just missed it, please again send it via the contact us page, because we want to hear things that we may have missed, stuff that is very valuable and should be spread far and wide. So
definitely, and that applies to all of our resources. I mean, charities that we've recommended or highlighted as possible ones to donate to, different like articles, etc. They've been sent to me at different times. So any resources that you think would be particularly beneficial, please do send those over.
100%.
Right. So now for my personal announcement. We've built this up now, Lawrence. It's just to say that in the coming months, I will be stepping away from antinatalist advocacy type activities. Lawrence and I met. This has been in the pipeline for a while. Lawrence and I met a few months ago to like hash out strategy. And there have also been some changes in personal circumstances. I'm becoming a father. That's good. No, it's just like changes in my career.
That was it. Just in case anyone didn't get that, that was a joke.
I'm just finding it quite difficult. Like I'm setting up a company, and it's quite hard to manage antinatalist advocacy with John Williams Sperm Donations Limited. Like the two are in conflict in my time, but not in values, as we talked about previously. But now, on a serious note, there have been some changes in personal circumstances, which I do think potentially we'll talk about. More will come out later. I'm going to be interviewed for another channel soon, so maybe we'll talk about it there. But there is still some antinatalist advocacy stuff to come down the pipeline over the next couple of months, including after today's stream, some sort of like write-up of the community panel with these 10 suggestions that we've got here.
Yeah, and just in case anyone is worrying, this doesn't mean antinatalist advocacy is going away. I will still be involved and all that. So yes, fear not. Unless you hate me, then fear much. Cool. Was there anything else you wanted to cover before we go into the 10 actual suggestions?
No, let's dive in. We have a habit of doing this on live streams of not getting to the subject matter. We've got 10 points to cover, so I think we should dive straight in.
Cool. Okay. So just for full transparency, John was mainly driving this write-up. So
yes.
Do you have them in front of you, and you want to go? Do you want to intro all 10 of them, and then we can have a bit of a discussion on each 10 as we go through?
Yes, I think that will make sense. Cool. And just to reiterate, these are 10 things that came out of our reflections on the community panel, and also our experience in other communities. But yeah, very much open to feedback. The first one, and this is really something we talked about quite a lot on the panel, and very important in the context of mostly online or remote spaces where the antinatalist community largely exists at the moment. And that is to make the intentions of spaces clear. Any thoughts on that, Lawrence?
Yeah, I think this is... So there's a couple of things that have come to mind, which is that... So obviously this is quite a... a sort of general suggestion, right? No sort of hard and fast well, not that we're in a position to be prescribing things to people, but you get what I mean. So I've seen the value of this in communities I've been a part of, both social and more like activisty based, right? And just to give one example, so there's a like a vegan social group in London, which I think you've maybe sort of interacted with somewhat, John, but I don't know if you're
Possibly.
actually part of a member of it. But anyway, so it has gotten to the point where it has like several hundred people in it, right? Which is quite an impressive size. And it's by and large moderated and sort of organized by one guy, mainly, not just him, but one guy. And honestly, I look at his ability to make the intention of the space there so clear, right? Because everything is organized online via WhatsApp, but it transfers into real life. All of the events are in real life. And his ability to keep that community together, because I'm sure we all know that communities can fall apart. If there's not someone with intention guiding a community, it can often, especially when it's organized and stuff online, it can very much fall apart like very quickly.
Yes, definitely.
It's not always the case, but it can happen. And his sort of I don't know if moderation is too formal a way to put it, but his sort of influence in the community to keep things on the intended purpose of the community, of specifically organizing events, not debating things online and people falling out over topics that are completely irrelevant to the actual, point at hand. I've just seen is so valuable, and I think it's probably the main thing that has actually kept the community functioning. I've seen multiple communities that don't have a clear intention end up ballooning, derailing, and everyone becomes unsatisfied, and then no one can be bothered to then put in, because it's gone downhill, no one can be bothered to put in the work to get it back uphill, and it just falls apart. So I think, making the intentions of the space clear are important for existing members, because they know how to interact with the community and what things to bring up and stuff like that. But also new people, when new people arrive, they're aware of what this space is about, if you get what I mean. I feel like I've just rambled, but you go.
No, I think that's all on point, because I think, like, for me personally, if I'm in a space and I know the intentions, it makes me feel a lot more comfortable. And, we all change over time. Like, there are plenty of spaces which I've joined. I thought it was relevant for me at the time, and then I've dipped out at some point down the line because I thought, it's no longer relevant for me. And by making the intentions of the space really clear up front, and reminders as well, because again, people can change over time and moderators might change, etc. Just making it really clear, it makes people feel comfortable. It lets them know what is allowed, what isn't allowed, whether it's a space for them at that moment or whether it isn't. Making your intentions super clear. I've definitely seen a lot of antinatalist groups on Facebook that are all called something like antinatalist group. It's quite vague, and it's a mix of kind of philosophy, ranting, socializing, and sometimes those kind of mixed spaces can work, but I definitely personally find it really beneficial when it's super clear. You come to this space for this purpose, and if that's not for you, then you don't have to join, something like that.
Yeah, and it can be quite jarring when you have different sort of factions, is making it sound stronger than I mean, but you have different, or should we say different expectations in the same place, right? So you brought up the example of a Facebook group. So you may have people in that Facebook group that are expecting something similar to the Effective Altruism Forum, where you have, extended essays, heavily cited, very, deeply thought through. And then you might have other people who are just there to shitpost and just share memes and have a laugh and stuff. And those two things aren't really going to gel together.
No.
And one of the groups is ending up going to leave, and it's just going to cause friction between people. So just that on a very basic level is important. There are examples of antinatalist spaces, or sort of not specifically antinatalist spaces, but spaces where there are a lot of antinatalists in, that I have been a part of, that have been quite well run. And the reason that they've stuck around and been successful is because the intention is very clear, and the intention is enforced is the wrong word to use, but the intention is made clear when new people join. And if they come in and they've clearly got a different expectation of what this space is going to be, then they're informed of, well, this space is for X, Y, Z, and actually, we're not here to do whatever you're trying to bring into it, because, if you want to do that, absolutely fine, but create a separate space for it,
Yes.
And Antinatalist can be in multiple spaces. One space that's much more casual, one space that is for considered thought and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's super valuable to have intention made clear. Because often I've just seen, then if you don't make the intention clear, everything just rushes to the lowest common denominator, and it doesn't really help anyone.
Yes, because then you end up with a dead space, because people think, well, I don't even know what I'm allowed to do in this group, so they either leave or they just check out, in terms of like they're still technically in a space, whatever it might be, a WhatsApp group, whatever. But they're not contributing, because they're like, I don't know what purpose the group is for, or what's allowed, what isn't allowed, what the other people are here for, and then it just it leads to a dead space, sadly. So keep the intentions of spaces clear. That's our first point. The second one was to have realistic goals, and we're thinking both in terms of I guess it's realistic goals in all aspects. So we were thinking realistic goals in terms of like activism for people who want to do good in the world, but also realistic goals in terms of community building. If you set your goal to be a perfectly harmonious community where everyone gets along and we all agree on stuff, all agree on the issues that you personally find important, you're probably setting yourself up to fail if you really want to achieve that goal. That can be like a North Star. You can have ambitious North Star goals that you work towards, but if you're thinking of things that are within your power to achieve, they've got to be realistic, because you'll feel very demoralized, both as an individual and as a community as well. If you you're setting yourself up to fail if you get too massively ambitious. Anyway, what are your thoughts, Lawrence, on setting realistic goals?
Yeah, I think for activism, I think it's super important, because I have seen, whilst it's very entertaining to often have, discussions about, the ideal outcome of antinatalist activism and talking about extinction and blah, 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 blah. I also find those interesting, and I will have those discussions with people, and it's all good. But I think the more important thing is to focus on the more like realistic, actual, tangible things you can do in the here and now, or in a few years' time, or some defined time period or whatever.
Yeah.
Because if we just focus on completely unrealistic goals but idealized goals, we're going to make the perfect the enemy of the good.
Yes.
And aiming to achieve things that are good and are progress, even though they're not perfect, and like you're never going to get to the finish line straight. Well, let's be honest, we're never going to get to the finish line. But even if it were possible to get to the finish line, there's no way you'd get to the finish line quickly, right? So I think having much more practical and realistic goals, for community, but specifically for activism I'm talking about, is very important. And I spoke about this in a discussion I had with a few other people, maybe like a month ago now or whatever. And I think I used the example of one really good thing that I think would be actually a massive win for antinatalism, but also just like people being better people generally, is if we were to be able to introduce ethics as a mandatory subject in schools.
Yes.
And as part of that class, procreative ethics and antinatalism as part of that were a mandatory subject. And I think there's a very good case for that. Obviously ethics, because that's something, it's relevant to everyone, because we all interact with other people. So, in my view, there's a very good case for it having to be mandatory in school anyway, because it's relevant to everyone, and it will be very important in the decisions you end up making. And then one of the biggest decisions that anyone ever makes is whether they reproduce or not. And so procreative ethics, there's a good case for that to be a mandatory part of the ethics class, right? And that's something that I think is a very like realistic and practical goal that an antinatalist in a specific country or locale could set themselves or set as a group. And it's something that I think you could get broad agreement on from other, sort of interested parties. It's not explicitly antinatalist, but it gets antinatalism into a discussion on quite a widespread scale, and with people who are young and haven't reproduced yet, right? So that's just one example. There are many, many other examples of realistic goals people could set themselves. But I think having something like that as a realistic goal is much more valuable than when someone comes to you and says, and you say, what is your goal? Lecturing them for 10 minutes on extinction. Still, the extinction conversation and all that stuff, still a valid thing to talk about. But in terms of the here and now and actually what you can change, I think these other things are much more important. But yeah, what do you think, John?
No, definitely. And I think your example is a really good one about ethics and getting ethics classes in schools, because I think if you're challenging a societal norm, just having the conversation is a really good first step, because letting people know this is something that can be questioned. So, if you live in a devoutly religious community, opening up a conversation on whether or not God exists is a win for atheism. Like if you're in the atheist community there, just opening up the conversation and letting people know that this is something that can be questioned is a win for your community. And we're in a similar state right now where, even getting procreative ethics, discussions about procreative ethics out there in the mainstream is a big win for us. Even if the word antinatalist wouldn't appear in any of the class literature, just getting people thinking about the rights and wrongs of bringing beings into the world would be a win. And as you said, something much more manageable. I do think that there is, although it is really important to have a long-term goal that you're striving towards, so you may never achieve, if you truly believe that it is impossible, or it's so unlikely that it's not worth pursuing, then I don't even think it works as a North Star. Like, for example, if your goal is to convince everyone of the truth of antinatalism, I'm not even sure if that would necessarily work as an end goal. To make it more mainstream, sure, but to convince everyone of the truth of antinatalism, I don't think would work as an end goal, because it seems incredibly unlikely that you'll manage to convince everyone to agree with your position, because there are people, like, I might agree with you, but there are plenty of people who stridently disagree who have thought about this as well. So maybe, have ambitious long-term goals, but maybe think about ones that are ambitious but somewhat realistic. But then, as you said, Lawrence, there are a ton of short-term goals which are still ambitious but much more within our grasp that we can unite behind without spending too long focused on, like, utopia.
Yeah. I was just quickly going to say, I've seen people in the chat are saying that I can actually also see it now as well. My camera's flickering. I don't know why it's doing that. I don't really want to fuck around with things while we're on the stream. So if it is annoying anyone, then maybe just listen for now, rather than look at the video. I know that's not the most ideal solution, but I'm not sure why it's doing that. But let's go on to the third one. But yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. The third one is that our differences are important, and differences in terms of, like, intellectual diversity. Lawrence, what do you want to say? What do you think about having intellectual diversity?
So I think having differences, like intellectual diversity or viewpoint plurality, or diversity as it's called, is something in a community that can cause a lot of friction. And I think we're both aware of that. Like, if you take the vegan community as an example, different vegans with different viewpoints are at each other's throats all the time. And it's the same in antinatalism. And I think that is a price that is, I don't think that has to happen, by the way. I think if everyone, were able to interact with each other in a civil way, then viewpoint diversity wouldn't necessarily cause those issues. But humans being humans, intellectual or viewpoint diversity is always going to cause some friction in a community. But I think that is a cost. Well, I was going to say worth accepting, but it's a cost we're going to have to accept because it's not something that's going to go away. But even if it were something we could make go away, I think it's a cost worth accepting for the benefits of viewpoint diversity, which is that even though we in the antinatalist sphere all kind of agree on like a core element of it, the differences we have are important so that we don't get it. It's basically just the generic case for free speech, right? Yes. You know, as you know, classically put forward by like John Stuart Mill, right? So in his case, in his like fucking hell, English has just escaped my on liberty. He basically makes the case of like it's good for everyone, right? Because you will get your view scrutinized, and if there are things that are untrue, you will get closer to the truth by having the untrue bits removed and questioned. And also, it's good for the people who are observing people who have a variety of opinion, because they will then get to take different bits from each and see what they find valuable and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and just to say as well, just on that point about the viewpoint, like challenging each other's views, I think there is a real value to that when you agree within that broader, like overall point to hash out those differences. I do think that there is a real value to that, because if someone already, you know, they identify as an antinatalist like you do, but they disagree about something, the kind of objections that you're going to get to your perspective of antinatalism are not going to be, oh, why don't you just, you know, end yourself type objections that you might get from someone who's coming across this idea for the first time. So you've got someone who's well versed, who isn't going to attack you for being for being an antinatalist, and is also probably quite familiar with the topic. So they probably have quite a valuable opinion to call out, you know, or to challenge you on some unfounded beliefs. And again, I've changed my mind on plenty of things over time. I've held some very daft positions, and having them being challenged by people who are within like a broader spectrum, who kind of understand where I'm coming from, has been super beneficial for me. I think as a community as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I also think like having viewpoint diversity in a community, in terms of like that being a benefit to drawing more people in as well. So even though antinatalists are going to disagree on things, they generally share a similar sort of core, there's a sort of core value judgment or fact that we all accept, right? But there's sort of like the coating around it is different for different people, and those different sort of flavors of antinatalism are going to appeal to different people. You know, like a different person is going to find the voluntary human extinction movement appealing to someone who finds, you know, David Benatar appealing, who's different from someone who's going to find the Exploring Antinatalism podcast appealing, and they come across it via that way. Do you get what I mean? So I also think it's beneficial in that way, in that a plurality of viewpoints is likely going to lead to a plurality of approaches to the subject that's going to it's going to appeal to different people. So there's also a benefit there.
And as well as not just disagreeing on things that relate to antinatalism, I think it's beneficial to have people who agree on antinatalism but disagree on other things.
Yes.
So that we don't get stereotyped based upon other issues. So people say, oh, this is just a left-wing thing, or it's a right-wing thing, or it's an atheist thing. You know, interestingly, I've heard that quite a lot, like that, you know, this is an atheist thing, that you have to be an atheist to be an antinatalist.
I've heard this as well.
But in the last time we went to Speaker's Corner, I was obviously talking to an Islamic preacher there, and if you're from a religion that believes in hellfire, I think you have a way stronger reason than I do as an atheist not to risk your kids coming to harm, because the amount of harm that I could inflict on my kids is quite a lot smaller than burning in a lake of fire for eternity. So just to show that, and we should welcome, you know, it's tough because obviously people are very passionate about these topics. These issues are important. I do think that there is a benefit to bringing people together who disagree on other like non-antinatalist topics as well. Not just to like generally that's good for social cohesion to meet people from different walks of life from you who have different perspectives, but also because from the outside it makes us harder to typecast as one set thing, you know, a group for left-wing atheists or something like that.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, the next point, number 4, was going to say, following on from that, our differences are important. It does help to focus on things that unite us. So yeah, obviously we were talking about the benefits of focusing on differences and challenging each other on differences. You know, in terms of the previous point on goals, again, it is helpful to find some common ground and work towards that common ground. It's very sorry.
No. Sorry. I jumped the gun.
I was going to say, especially in an antinatalist community where within the antinatalist label, people have different understandings of antinatalist, there will be some sort of common core, you'd hope, around at least bringing human beings into existence, or something about recognizing the harms of coming into this existence, the suffering of life. And I think it can help to unite on that for a goal. And again, I think your example, Lawrence, was a really good one. Like, it would be hard to find an antinatalist who wouldn't support mainstreaming conversations about procreative ethics. And that comes from, I think, recognizing our similarities for the purpose of like pursuing goals. What are your thoughts, Lawrence?
Yeah, to be honest, it's just reiterating what you've said. Like I said in the last one, you know, that viewpoint diversity, while it's valuable, like we've just said, the drawback is that it can cause a lot of friction. Yes. But one way to remedy that friction is for each person to make a concerted effort to be critical of each other, you know, when it's relevant, to be critical, when it's appropriate, right? But also keeping in mind that actually the people in your community should not, we should not be sort of like suspicious of them as like the enemy. At the end of the day, both people are engaging in the community generally because they think this idea is going to be of benefit in some way, and focusing on the fact that both of you align on that, even though you may have other differences, will help you to push things forward, like forms of activism or pursuing things that you both find interesting. And I think whilst differences are important, differences, like focusing on them too much, is going to cause a community to fracture, because you're not focusing on the thing that's actually binding that community together. You know,
it's all about difference, and at some point there needs to be some unity to hold, as you said, to hold the community together. So you don't want to make the difference. You're focusing on differences your whole, the whole shebang. There's something about focusing on the unity as well.
Yeah, and I think. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I've seen so many times, not necessarily in the antinatalist sphere, because there aren't actually that many people in the grand scheme of things doing antinatalist activism, but in vegan activism, I have seen so many times people say that they won't work on a specific campaign or thing because XYZ person is also involved in it.
Yes.
Right. And it's just so unfortunate, because sometimes there is a genuine issue, that like there is a reason that they don't want to work with this person that I'm sympathetic with. But so many times it's because that person holds a different opinion on some other topic which is not relevant at all to the thing that you're trying to do here.
Yes.
And the only individuals that lose out from you not coming together on something you do agree on and working on something you do agree on is the animals in that case, right?
Yeah.
In antinatalism, if an equivalent thing happened, it would be that, the beings that would come into existence, were you not to do this, take this form of activism, whatever it would be, they would be the ones losing out, obviously, from an antinatalist perspective. And I think that's really worth bearing in mind when when you've gotten to the point where you've got a fracture with someone, or you notice a fracture in a community, really thinking about like what is actually causing this fracture. Is it something that we can actually reasonably like put our differences aside on? Is my ego getting involved rather than actually, is this practically does this actually practically mean anything? Is it going to practically get in the way of us actually working together? Or is it something that actually, maybe I've just taken a bit of offense over something? And look, it all happens to all of us. There are some people that hold opinions that I feel uncomfortable with, but I still work with those people anyway, right?
Definitely. My workplace is very good because they do a little bit of like political campaigning type work. And all the individuals who work on the campaign, they have their own opinions, obviously, but they recognize for the good of whatever change they want to see that they need to build a broad base of support and put those opinions to one side for the good of whatever political change or whoever they're looking to help. Yeah. And I think that is definitely the way to go. And for the fifth point, this does follow on from this, because we were thinking with this one about uniting within the antinatalist community. But this fifth point is about building bridges with other communities where that look promising for collaboration on a specific issue, where we have something in common with them, but where we wouldn't lose our own identity as an antinatalist community, if you like. Like we're clearly distinct from a different community. And there may be some overlap in terms of individuals, but we can unite with said community on specific things. So different groups that come to mind, including where, again, there's a lot of like dual membership, if you like. Membership is obviously not an official thing, but where people might be involved in both spaces. So obviously the child-free community, although there's surprisingly not that came out on the panel, actually, that there didn't seem to be that much overlap or interaction between people who, were active in the child-free community and people who are active in antinatalism. So I think hopefully, maybe this is a bit naive, but some quick wins there. Animal activists, again, a big overlap, certainly for me and you, Lawrence, as individuals. Environmentalists, in terms of like why people might first become concerned about population. And then people concerned about extreme suffering. So negative utilitarians, but however they would identify, people who are just ethically concerned about extreme suffering. We see some potential collaboration, potential alignment with those kinds of communities. And what are your thoughts, Lawrence, on building bridges with other communities in general, and also any particular communities that look promising?
Yeah, I think in just like a zoomed out sort of response to this, I think working with other groups is going to be very valuable, because there are other groups that are much more like mature than the antinatalist community. When I say mature, I don't mean like the antinatalist community is immature in terms of like us as people. I mean, as in it's much more developed, should we say? Maybe developed is a better word. So there are communities out there that are much more developed, have already existing structures, there's finances, all this sort of stuff. And if antinatalists align on a specific thing with those groups, then engaging with those groups and benefiting from those structures is a massive win.
Yes.
And there's also, if we work with other groups, we can influence them and they may become more antinatalist. They may also influence us, and it may mean that we can sort of like fine tune our antinatalism or our approach to doing good. But there are a range of groups that I think antinatalists could align on. So you've already mentioned some of them. So obviously animal rights activism, preventing animals from coming into existence would be a massive win. Because on average their lives are just much, much worse than humans.
There's lots of them as well.
Sorry?
And there's lots of them as well.
Yeah, and there's lots of them. So the effort you put into preventing animals from coming into existence is probably going to lead to more animals not coming into existence than if you put the same effort in the human case. So there's the animals. Also, if you go back to the example of the one I was talking about, introducing ethics in schools, there's going to be loads of groups interested in education reform.
Yeah.
So there's going to be loads of structures around that already that you can get help from and stuff.
Free speech advocates. I thought was maybe one that we didn't think of, especially in if you're in like a conservative kind of religious country.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've had people on the panel before, Lawrence, who struggle to talk about antinatalism in that kind of context. So like freedom of thought, freedom of inquiry type advocates.
Yeah. And actually, interestingly enough, the next just slightly on topic, but the next episode of Antinatalism not the next one. So there's one coming out. The one after that is with someone from a country where they, it's very unwelcoming to antinatalism in terms of the regime there. So that's going to be a really interesting one. Super relevant to your example of like in that country, if they were able to liberalize in terms of their speech laws and codes, that would be a win for antinatalism, as it would for just intellectual pursuits generally, or ethical pursuits generally. Other examples, there are a multitude of organizations and charities working on providing contraception to people, getting them educated about contraception, challenging conservative religious cultural attitudes towards sex and contraception, reducing infant mortality. These are all things that are going to help prevent new beings from coming into existence, and it's all stuff that antinatalists can overlap with people on. And then one additional reason to build bridges with communities like that and organizations like that is that you can impact change that will align with antinatalism, but you can almost do it under their branding, which, depending on the group, would be much more sympathetic. The average person will be much more sympathetic to, right? Yes. The average person is much more sympathetic to helping people in deprived areas get access to contraception than they are some wise kid talking about how humans need to go extinct. Do you get what I mean? The completely different messages, but if you're able to work with this group under their branding, you're affecting change that you agree with, but you're going to be able to get a lot further because you don't have to wade through the mud of talking about the ethics of extinction and all this shit. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate your point as well, Lawrence, about infrastructure, there's very little antinatalist infrastructure, but there's plenty in other movements that we can benefit from. I mean, if you just look at Antinatalist Advocacy's website,
100%.
We've compiled a bunch of resources that we've shamelessly stolen. We are fully we're referring people to them, but a ton of different like effective altruism adjacent resources that we think can be really beneficial for antinatalists looking to do good. And that was just stuff that we basically stumbled upon and then packaged together on a website. There's just plenty of there's just plenty of stuff out there, especially compared to our own community. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel and can collaborate across different communities. Sure.
Yeah.
Then number 6, this ties into our first point about purpose, about the purpose of spaces. And this was that online spaces need careful but fair moderation.
So, my thoughts on this one are, I don't think, obviously it's not always appropriate to have a moderator, right? In a small private chat between a few antinatalists, it's not like you need to have a designated moderator or whatever. But I mean, maybe in like a small way you could call that a community if it's just like 5 people in a group chat. But like when we're talking about community, we're talking about on like a larger scale, right? So when you get to things like big Facebook groups or Discord servers or whatever, then or like the Reddit, right? This is where you get to the point where you need careful but fair moderation, and it gets into what we were talking about before, like John said, with the intention of the space, but also like people's conduct in that space, right? So whilst it's good to have viewpoint diversity, obviously, it's not always appropriate to have complete open diversity in terms of approach. You know, some people may encourage behaviors that are very toxic to the community itself, but maybe they're just like downright unethical. I'm sure we can all, think of some. And I think moderation is important for that reason, but it's also important for like retaining people in those communities, because if you have careful but fair moderation, people will feel like they're I don't know how to word it. I've actually just lost my train of thought, so I'll give
efficiency, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I'll give a few examples though, right? Like the Reddit, that's split into two Reddits now, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know the full sort of lowdown on the drama, but my understanding is that there was a disagreement with the moderation, and obviously some people perceived it as unfair, right? Which just goes to show now. Careful and fair moderation is easy to say. It may be very hard to put into practice because there are always going to be people who feel affronted by that.
Yes, and there's going to need to be someone who is the moderator who subjectively makes a decision that other people might disagree with. It's not like it's like a referee in a sports game. It's not 100% objective, and they're not going to get it 100% factual.
Yeah, and yeah, and another example is like on Facebook groups. So I'm not going to name names, but we've both been in a Facebook group where we thought that there was active moderation in the group, which was good, but it wasn't fair. Or we neither of us perceived it as fair. And to be honest, I think pretty much no one would perceive it as fair if they knew the full details. And
I think we can say that example because it is one.
Okay.
I think it's important to say as an example of unfair moderation. And I've got a counter example on the same.
Yeah. Okay, go on. Yeah.
So in this particular one, there were certain topics that were banned from being discussed, and I think that is a totally fair policy to say that in this space, this antinatalist space, we want to talk about this and not X, Y, or Z, other things that you think are related. Now, I think that veganism is not just related to antinatalism, but there's a part of it in the sense of you're bringing beings into existence.
Yeah.
In this space, it said you're not allowed to talk about veganism. I thought, you know what? That's fair. We don't talk about it. But then one of the moderators would bring up veganism, disparage it, and then if anyone replied to his post, would ban them.
Yeah.
And that's like, hang on, you're not abiding by your own rules here. It would be totally fair to say ban this topic and no one mentions it. But if the moderator is breaking the rules, then come on, that's not really fair.
No, go on. No.
I was going to say, just to give the counter example of a fair example, I think, of moderation, in a WhatsApp group, a London antinatalist WhatsApp group we were in, someone was very upset that one of the members of the groups used to be vegan and then started eating animals again, and was vocally in this. Well, vocally it was over WhatsApp, but was voicing their how disappointed they were in it. I personally found it quite disappointing, but there was pushback, and I think pushback from other members of the group, which I think was right, and that we joined in with to say, I understand you're disappointed, but this is an antinatalist group that it says nothing about being vegan to join. This is for antinatalists. It's not a vegan group. So, although there is a lot of overlap, and I think probably over half the people in the group are vegan, kicking up a fuss like this and being hostile over an unrelated topic is just not fair. And this individual left ultimately, the one who was kicking up the fuss, and we said no. The person who's no longer a vegan is still welcome, because this is the purpose of the space. This is an antinatalist space. This is not a vegan space. So, you have to accept that people will disagree with you on other topics that you feel very passionate about. And I think that was a good example of moderation, where we said that this is what the space is for. This person is abiding by the rules, and you're not.
Yeah, and I think that the first example you gave is a good example of how this about careful and fair moderation fits well with the intent. Intention point, because the intention of that Facebook group was very clear. We talk about antinatalism, and veganism is not something we talk about here.
Yeah.
Completely fair to, I don't agree with it, but completely fair to have as an intention. and that's fine to have as an intention, that it abides by the first suggestion, right? Completely in line with that. But when it comes to this sixth suggestion, whilst the intention is made clear, the moderation of that group is not in alignment with that intention.
Yes.
Because the moderation is banning other people from talking about it, but the moderator themselves, who's got to be in their bonnet on the topic, starts talking about the topic and going against the intention of the space.
And then banning people for giving the alternative opinion. It's like banning people from talking about the topic, but then him giving one side of the issue, and then banning people who would then respond, including banning someone who said, "Can we now talk about this?" Questioning the moderator was not for him. So, yes, as you said, Lawrence, it's about once you have set that intention and you've made the intention clear, it does need that careful but fair moderation, which involves sticking to the clearly articulated intention that we've for. That's something maybe for us in reflection to try and switch around the order of these. So this one follows the previous point anyway. Number 7, following on from what we were just talking about with an unpleasant experience that we had with a certain individual in the community. Number 7 is to have a culture of forgiveness. I can talk about this as someone who's made plenty of mistakes in my time, plenty of stuff that I now really cringe about in the past that I thought I was justified in doing, but also stuff where I knew I wasn't justified, but because I was being angry or emotional, whatever it might be, I did it anyway. Lawrence has listened to a few of my rants, which maybe aren't me putting my best foot forward. But I wouldn't want to be judged by my worst moments or the past behaviours, which I now regret and have remorse for. So I think it's only fair to not judge others by their worst moments. Again, if they show genuine regret and remorse, like we all screw up from time to time. And I think it's good to have a culture of forgiveness as a result.
Yeah, I think a culture of forgiveness is always good. Like, people have their moments and screw up. I think it's important to have that culture, one, because obviously it helps to it helps people like maintain their engagement in the group, right? So it's very easy, once someone messes up, they may feel ashamed by that or something, and they may remove themselves from the group. So it will help the community not become like a revolving door. But it's also like, at some point you yourself will screw up, and John said he screwed up. I've screwed up in certain times, and you don't want people to then just like dogpile you, right? Where I think a culture of forgiveness is very good, but I think sometimes there's a fine line between having a culture of forgiveness and being a doormat to people who have toxic ongoing behavior, right?
Yes.
So I think we should have a culture of forgiveness when people, screw up every now and again. That happens. But that doesn't mean that you as an individual have to be completely open to any person who behaves in any way, especially if it's an ongoing behavior, right? So, So I think that's also an important thing to make clear as well, is like, no one has to be, like all Buddha about everything and say, everything is peace and love. If there is someone who has consistently shown themselves to be someone who's toxic or behaves in a way you don't agree with, it is also completely fine to not interact with that person. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to be a doormat and accept everything from everyone. It just means if they do something wrong or there's something you don't agree with, you don't have to like launch a cancellation campaign against them. But it also means you don't have to welcome them into your personal space and interactions, if you get what I mean.
Yes. Yeah. And I think especially in the case where remorse is shown, I think there's a difference between saying, okay, this person, again, we're mostly in online spaces. I'm not going to say that this person is a bad person, but you can say this person has consistently demonstrated behavior that I personally find objectionable. And if they're truly remorseful for that, I think that is very different than if they're just continually just demonstrating that same behavior over and over and over and over again. At that point, I don't think that forgiveness is necessarily the case. But again, that doesn't mean that you go on a huge, a huge tirade or a huge, as you said, like a cancellation campaign or a huge toxic rant about someone publicly. Like you start a hate campaign or start behaving in the way that they were behaving back to them. I think as we said, I think that forgiveness is an interesting one because, you can forgive someone and never talk to them again, never interact with them again. But I do think it is good because, again, we all screw up. I maybe not so much in the antinatalist community because I haven't been in the community that long, but I think definitely when I was in the atheist community, I said some things about religious people which were really very unkind. And I even knew it at the time, and I just said them anyway. And I'm remorseful now, but I can definitely say that at the time, if people kicked me out when I wasn't remorseful, that's fair enough. I wasn't asking for forgiveness, but I certainly wouldn't want someone now to say that, oh, well, you write John off because he said these unkind things back in the day that he's apologised for. And I should have the same. It's about not being a hypocrite. I should have the same standards for other people. Again, I don't want to be judged for things that I regret. So I think generally as a community, it's good to give people second chances. Now, again, if someone does the same behaviour over and over again and keeps apologising, then I think it's fair to question how legit that apology is. Like, if you're really that sorry, you wouldn't keep doing it. In general, I don't think we want to one strike, you're out. You messed up once.
Yeah, and like John said, like forgiveness can have different forms. You can forgive someone and welcome them back as a friend. Or you can forgive someone and say, look, I'm not, I forgive you for whatever you've done, but I don't want to have some ongoing relationship with you.
Yes.
And both are completely fine. It depends on your sensitivities, and it depends on what they've done, and it depends on the context of the situation, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Number 8. So again, most of what we've been talking about, it's in the context of a very, nearly always online community. So number 8 was quite simply, it's good to get offline from time to time. In other words, just to meet up occasionally in person, if possible. Yeah. What do you think of the benefits, Lawrence? I know you've talked about this before, when you've posted like pictures of antinatalist meetups and stuff like that. What do you think of the benefits of meeting up in person?
Yeah, I think this one's super important. So I think everyone just knows that meeting people in person has a different flavor to it than interacting with people over even video call.
Yeah, definitely.
When you're on a video call, there are, I don't even know how to necessarily phrase it, but in person there are just spontaneous things that happen, and you have more interactions with other people and the context around you that you wouldn't have even on a video call. And it allows you to get to know the other person. Something as simple as if you go to a restaurant and you're forming a friendship with someone, on a very basic level, in that context, you get to see how they interact with other people, like the waiter, the waitress, whoever. There's just a completely different flavor to forming relationships with people in person than just online. I also think, obviously, like online, the interactions we have with people, it's, for whatever reason, much easier to dehumanize people and go to the extreme online than it is in person. Maybe that's because in person there's that element of social awkwardness that just comes in when you're in person with someone. Social awkwardness becomes a thing, whereas on text chat or video, I mean, video chat maybe as well, but like on text chat, awkwardness just isn't really a thing. And like social awkwardness can help moderate a situation and mean that people won't get as not divisive, but aggressive is maybe the wrong word, but I think people get what I mean.
Confrontational, maybe.
Yeah, confrontational. Confrontational. Yeah, and I think also, like, being in person, you can just do more things, right? You can go for a meal, or you can go and do a sport or something together, or there are a whole range of things you could do. Just go on a walk. There are a whole range of things that you can do with people that you can't do online. And I think that just, if you're talking about building community, that deepens the relationships you have with people, right? Yeah.
I'm thinking about the first time that I met other self-described antinatalists in person, and it was just really nice. There's something about feeling at home that you don't get when you're all on a Zoom call or something.
Yeah.
When you meet others, you've all come together for that purpose, and especially in a community that's I don't know if it sound like playing the victim, but not demonized in the sense of we're oppressed or anything, but misunderstood, I think, would be a fair one. Definitely has aspersions cast about us that may or may not be true. It is nice just to meet other people who are antinatalists, who are like normal people. Not claiming that I'm a normal person, but you know what I mean. It's nice to meet people in real life.
But it does humanize them more as well, right?
Massively.
Like, yeah, because I fall for this as well, and I'm sure loads of people do. When you're interacting with someone online in an antinatalist community, you really mostly talk to them about that one subject, maybe a few other related subjects, and so you don't fully appreciate them for who they are. You don't understand like the real things that happen in their life, the sort of likes, dislikes they have, the mannerisms and stuff like this. It's like when you meet someone in person, you get to see them sort of in a wider breadth of who they are. You get to see like a wider breadth of who they are. It's almost like, oh, they're a real person. They're not just this avatar I interact with online about these specific niche issues. Do you get what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I think the full person point as well, and I think as well, it's just a lot harder to be mean to a full person.
Yeah.
You see the complete person. You don't see them as this thing that you negatively attach to them. And again, in the community where there can be friction, again, it's nice to meet someone in person for sure. So yeah, that was why we thought it'd be good to it's good to get offline from time to time.
Yeah.
Number 9. Speaking of friction within the community. And I'm definitely guilty of this at times. The antinatalist community, it can be, I'm sure lots of people have had negative experiences in this community, interacting with other antinatalists or, different spaces, wherever it might be. But I think that sometimes we run the risk of forgetting that community building is difficult, which is what number 9 is that communities of different, especially a community that's joined by an ideological persuasion, arguing over stuff is the norm. It just is the norm. And there are other communities where there is more in common. I think I was talking about this in a previous live stream. There is more in common in other communities than with the antinatalist community, more to disagree about, potentially. So, and they still argue with, they still argue with each other over lots of stuff. Take the vegan community as an example, one that we both know. You have shared beliefs. Again, not completely shared beliefs, but you do have beliefs that very strongly correlate, especially compared to people outside of the community. So that's one thing. And you have shared actions. Again, not 100% shared actions, but actions that very strongly correlate compared to people outside of the community. And they still are, it's still arguing a lot with it. There's a lot holding them together, but there's still plenty of friction. So we should expect within the antinatalist community, this loosely held together antinatalist community that doesn't get offline very often, that this would be difficult. And it's just to say it's tough. It's easy to get dispirited, but remember, everyone struggles with this, and we should expect to as well. So don't get too dispirited if you find community building difficult, and stay positive, really, I guess.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is I'd just say, like, get involved. You know, community building is difficult, and the thing that is going to make it happen is people actually, like, you know, doing stuff to help build a community. You know, there's some sort of natural gravitational pull of people together that are interested in the idea that you can rely on to help form a community, but to actually get it to stick together and coalesce in a healthy and fluid way, that's what takes the effort, right? People are interested in this subject, and they always will be interested in this subject, and they will come together as a result. But to get people to stay together and to have meaningful and healthy connections with each other and do productive stuff like activism, that actually takes getting things done, right? And actually doing stuff. So obviously me and you have done that in certain ways, both that people are aware of and people that are unaware of. There are other people in the chat, like Nick was in the chat earlier, I saw. So he does Stop Having Kids stuff, you know, and he helps connect people that way, helps organize stuff. So, and there are a bunch of other people that I could reel off, you know, names of. It's just, if you want there to be a community and a healthy community at that, it's going to take us as individuals doing stuff, whether that is, if you think that you could be a reasonable and a fair moderator, go for a moderator position. The Reddit recently had a call out for moderators, right? So that's just one example. You know, starting a local meetup group in your area. I promise you there are other antinatalists that you can connect with in, if not your immediate local area, at least your general area, right? I mean, maybe if you live in, like, I don't know, rural Zimbabwe or something, maybe you're not going to find. But then, like, you've got people like Benedictines, The Truth, walking around, like, rural South Africa, right? So, like, you've got a guy who's cranking out loads of videos, who just lives in somewhere you maybe wouldn't guess an antinatalist would be, right? So there are antinatalists spread all over the place, or even if they're not antinatalists, people who can align with your general, people that you can find some alignment with, child-free, suffering-focused ethics, vegan, whatever. And also, just another thing on that is, like, if you're wanting to get involved with the community and learn how it works and then try and transfer that over to the antinatalist community, you could also try doing that. Vegan community is one really good way of doing that. Vegan community, often very highly organized in certain ways, sometimes not, but often very highly organized now. Pretty much vegan groups everywhere. And there's a lot to learn there, and you can transfer it over to the antinatalist world, you know. And there are a lot of antinatalists that do that. A lot of the antinatalist organizers of stuff that I know or know of are vegan, and they've come from doing vegan activism, and they're the people that have transferred these things over. But anyway, sorry, John, you were going to say something.
No, I absolutely agree. I was going to say, you go to other communities that are more advanced than us in terms of infrastructure, in terms of number of, you know, amount of time they've been around, number of members, etc. There's going to be stuff to learn from them, and again, they can be completely unaligned. Completely. Often the things that help with building, like bringing the community together, don't often have a huge amount to do with the ideological position. Like, people like going to church. They like going to church because, you know, obviously there is the religious element of it. There is the connection to God and that, but they've got friends there. They do nice things together. They have barbecues. They, you know, their kids play together. They hang out. They help each other in times of need. They do nice stuff together that doesn't have to be tied to the ideological position. So you can learn about community building, about things that have got nothing to do with antinatalism, and try and apply those lessons into building an antinatalist community. And that's maybe one thing, again, we can talk about, oh, we're so small, we're so insignificant, you know, and all this. One way of flipping it positively is that there are communities that have been going thousands of years, and we can learn from them. It's early days yet. It's, you know, we can learn from the mistakes of other communities. We can learn from where they've maybe misstepped, but also what they do really, really well, what brings people together. yeah, we can take that and hopefully build a healthier antinatalist community with that knowledge.
Yeah, 100%.
Should we go to number 10?
Yeah, let's do it.
And the last one, in fact, let's recap the previous 9 before we get to that last one. So the first is to make the intentions of spaces clear. We're thinking mainly with an online context, but really to make it clear what is allowed in the space, what is the purpose of it, helps people feel comfortable, know if the space is for them, helps people, contribute to that space with some safety, with a bit of a safety net around them, some barriers, some guidance in terms of what they can do. And having realistic goals, both in terms of activism and with community building, recognizing that our differences are important, that we have a lot of ideological diversity within our community about antinatalist related issues, but also on issues in general and the benefits of that. But also to focus on things that unite us at times. We don't always have to focus on our differences, especially when it comes to achieving goals and activism. There is something I believe that does hold us together as a community, and it can be helpful to focus on that with respect to certain goals. Also building bridges with other communities, as we just said, tons that we can learn from other communities, plenty of communities that they might not have the antinatalist label, but they do align with us on something. I realized that we didn't mention the feminist movement before in terms of access to contraception, female empowerment initiatives, these kind of things that we can support as well. Loads of different groups that we mentioned before. Online spaces needing careful but fair moderation, linking to that point about the intention of the space, making sure that you are being, fair and that you're sticking to the purpose of the group and people feel respected but respected and guided within their conduct within the space. Having a culture of forgiveness, again, I wouldn't want to be judged by my mistakes, so it's only fair not to judge others by that. It does just create a better kind of atmosphere within the community. It's good to get offline from time to time, as we mentioned before. Tons of benefits to being in person, as and when it would be appropriate. But definitely, if possible, try and get offline occasionally so you can meet people face to face. And then number 9, just remember that community building is difficult. It's not to get too dispirited. Lots of communities built on ideological positions struggle with this. And number 10, the final on the list, is quite simply that kindness goes a long way. Again, the AN community, it can feel a bit dysfunctional and unfriendly at times. And I've had some interactions that have left me feeling quite angry, and I've wanted to lash out. And I have done in private, as you know. I've ranted to Lawrence about something. Like that guy, and whatever. But when I've calmed down, I've had that knee-jerk reaction. You're thinking about how to respond to a situation that's upset me. Genuinely, kindness has always been the best option. And it doesn't mean that you be a doormat. It doesn't mean, as Lawrence said before, that someone who's been really uncharitable, unfair towards you in certain ways, you have to do what they want. But it does mean that you don't have to be malicious. You don't have to be cruel in some way. You can assert your boundaries and react appropriately to situations while still being kind, while not saying that this person who you don't know, you might disagree with their behavior, not casting them as an irredeemably horrible scumbag or something like that, even if they've done behavior which you strongly disagree with. Yeah, I do think that kindness does just generally go a long way. Kindness to each other, kindness to individuals outside of the community, and kindness to yourself as well. Not putting too much pressure on yourself, especially when it comes to community building, because as we said, it can be tough. What are your thoughts, Lawrence, in terms of kindness and the role it could play in community building?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think kindness. So, I guess when it comes, because kindness can kind of be like a vague word, and I think how it could be. I actually don't know if this phrase that I'm going to use will transfer to other languages, but in English anyway, we have this phrase of being the bigger person, right? Yes. And I think kindness can often be, if someone comes at you with vitriol or treats you in a way that you don't think you deserved, you can respond in kind, right? But even though maybe you wouldn't see it as kindness, because maybe some people see kindness of like, doing something active towards the other person that's really nice or whatever. That's not necessarily what has to be kindness. Kindness can also be just not giving a reply. If someone's sending vitriol to you, an act of kindness can be, okay, I'm just going to not interact with that person. Which means you're not giving that vitriol back, right? And it's also, I guess, it's kindness to yourself as well.
Yes,
it's like
you're not being a doormat. You're not saying
you're not being a doormat.
Yeah, exactly. This person says, but you're not at the same time lashing out maliciously or something. Like that.
But kindness in terms of like being charitable to the other person, kindness in terms of if, for example, there have been, like, I'll give examples of how people have been like very kind to me, right? So there have been a whole range of times where people have helped me out with research for a video, or have agreed to give up their time to be on a video, or for example, I'll give one example. I don't know if they'd want to be named by name, so I won't. But for one of my videos, I wanted to have something where people could click on a link and download something to be able to download a PDF. And I didn't want to have to create a whole account on a website or whatever to upload this PDF to it for people to be able to download. And I had a friend who already had an account there, right? And he just offered, I'll just upload it to my account. You can add it to your, to your video description, and they can download it from my account. This may sound like a very like small act, but it's that sort of approach to interacting with others of like kindness, doing favors for people when you want to and you think it's appropriate. But yeah, just the fact that like there have been so many people who have helped me put videos together that in other contexts they would want payment, but they haven't asked for payment, or some form of compensation. I mean, yeah, maybe I will mention them in the description of the video or whatever as a thank you, but there's no sort of hard form of compensation that is being requested or anything. These are all like acts of kindness, right? Like, helping someone out with something. Sometimes when they haven't even asked, you just offer, Again, that's not to say that you need to do all of this, that you don't need to do everything for everyone. You don't need to be a doormat, blah, blah, blah. But if we all approach the community in that general sense of like, yeah, I'll help people. And I do this in return, right? So like, just as one example, very small example, I've helped a few people out with thumbnails. I'm not the most amazing person in the world at thumbnails. Sometimes my thumbnails are super cringy. But often I will have more skill at making a thumbnail than another content creator in the antinatalist space, or who is an antinatalist. And they've reached out to me and they've asked for a bit of help, and I've put something together for them, right? So it's that reciprocal nature. And these aren't necessarily people. I've had people help me in some way. I will help other people in some way. And you don't really expect something in return. I think it's approaching your interactions with other people with that general air, I think is quite good. And I think it fits under this sort of like kindness goes a long way kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing to bear in mind about kindness compared to negativity is that I used to work as just to demonstrate the point that we often recall negativity before we recall like the positive stuff. It's actually something that we hear a lot when we talk about the suffering in life as antinatalists. But I used to work as a fundraiser, going door to door asking people to donate to charity. And when we all met up at the car at the end of the day, my fellow fundraisers, we always talk about the guy who swore at us or slammed his door in our face or something. And not the 99 people who were super kind. Even if they didn't donate, they said, look, I appreciate what you're doing, but no thank you. And that just goes to show that most interactions I've had in the antinatalist community have been very positive. People have been very kind towards me. But again, in a way that you said, Lawrence, the way that I haven't done anything for them necessarily, but they've just been very kind in their word or actions. So me focusing on the negativity is actually a little unfair to the people who've done the nice things, because I'm always not giving them credit. I'm giving all the credit to the negative behavior and not the positive stuff. So It really can go a long way, and it can create a norm where you just hang out with groups of people who are just really nice. It's a bit of a stereotype about certain groups of Christians that they're just really nice to each other. And you're thinking, oh, is it because they want to convert me and save my soul from hell? And yes, there might be some of that as well. There might be some of that. But it becomes a culture. You know what I mean? A culture of kindness that just makes it really pleasant to interact with those people.
Yeah, I actually, just on that very subject, I actually literally had that the other week, or maybe it was a couple of months ago now. So John and I have a mutual friend who's recently converted to Christianity.
Yes.
And he goes to church very, frequently. I think it's made a tangible positive, even though I'm not Christian, I'm not religious, I don't believe in that. I have seen it make a tangible positive change in his life, right?
Yes.
And so, one, out of curiosity, because I've actually I don't think I've ever been to a proper church service, and out of support for him, even though I don't necessarily agree with the truth claims and stuff, I went along to a church service, and the people there were super kind. And then I went to a Bible study afterwards, because again, in the church service, it was more like someone talking to you, like talking at you from a stage.
Yes.
The Bible study, I wanted to actually have discussions with people and stuff. And those people, even though, I don't have the same point of view as them, they were just genuinely nice people. And they would go out of their way to do things for me. And they spoke in like a very respectful and considerate manner. And yeah, I just they were just really nice people to hang out with, basically. So that was just to your point, if you have this approach to interactions with people, another thing I want to add is these are all aspirational points. No one's going to be perfect at this all the time. This is something I aspire to, but I fall off the wagon sometimes. Sometimes I will treat someone in a way that I, look back on and think I shouldn't have treated them in that way, or I didn't like that I treated them in that way. We're all human. No one's perfect, that sort of stuff. But as an aspiration, but yeah. Anyway, sorry. I just wanted to share that anecdote because it was off the back of what you were saying.
Definitely. Should we see if there's any comments for us to reply
to?
I think we've run through the 10. Okay,
nice one. So that was all 10. I'll quickly go through the chat. I've seen there are a few messages in the chat which aren't really on topic, so we're not going to address them. But if there's anything that is on topic, so I did see that Vegan Equilibrium asked, why do you think that hasn't happened yet? And that was with respect to getting ethics to be mandatory in schools. Now, that's a specific example, so maybe we won't go into it in massive detail because it's not really, that's more like a specific application of what we're talking about rather than the general points. But honestly, I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. I could get conspiratorial and start talking about how the government wants to keep us all dulled down, wage slaves, etc., blah, blah, blah. In reality, it's probably not that. There's probably always resistance to changing the syllabus or the curriculum in some way. It may be something that happens in the future. I do know that Jamie Woodhouse, who runs the Sentientism podcast, I'm pretty sure I've heard him mention about how he's working with people to try and get sentientism in the syllabus, in the national curriculum in the UK, which would be a very positive thing. So, yeah, there are things afoot to get sort of kind of related topics into the curriculum. That's in the UK, not in the US, because I know Nick's in the US. But yeah, ultimately, I don't know what the specific reason is that hasn't specifically happened yet. I don't know if you have any speculation, John.
No, I've got a couple of sisters who are teachers. I mean, they have such a packed curriculum. There's a lot of stuff that we don't have in the school curriculum in the UK, like first aid training. I did fundraising for a charity when I was first getting in the charity space that was focused on first aid, and yeah, that's not in the school curriculum. And swimming lessons are not in the school curriculum in the UK. Life skills type stuff doesn't really get on there.
Understanding tax and pensions,
anything about tax, pensions, employment law that could relate to us. Renting would be a nice one. Mortgages, things that you need to do, like life admin. It doesn't tend to be on the curriculum. Like cooking isn't really on the curriculum anymore. So there's quite a lot that we haven't got on our school curriculum. We do have religious education, but from what I remember of those classes, it was very much like, okay, in Christianity, you have Protestants, Catholics, and other sects. Jesus Christ lived here. In Islam, you have 5 pillars. In Judaism, you have the Torah. It was very kind of, and it wasn't really teaching critical thinking or encouraging debate, to be honest. I'm struggling even to think about what the questions were on, because I don't think they asked us, which religion's the best. No, they wouldn't ask that. Yeah. They weren't asking us anything controversial, I don't believe. I think a packed curriculum in the UK, because lots of people want lots of stuff on the curriculum, and it's the pushback is always, we can't, because we've already got so much stuff we need to teach them.
Another, this isn't a question, but it's just a comment from Anna. Anna says, "Hey everybody, nice to see John on the channel. Love to see your videos together." So I thought I'd read that one out, John, because it was about you.
Just read out the positive stuff. No, but thank you, Anna. That's very kind. And glad you appreciate these types of videos.
But yeah, to be honest, there's a few other like messages here and there, but none of them are really on the topic of the stream at all. So that's everything. Did you have any closing thoughts you wanted to add, John? Anything you thought was sort of missed by the 10 suggestions? Maybe it's like a minor point that you didn't think warranted another. Didn't make the cut of the big 10, but it was also worth.
I think, to be fair, with 10, I think you can cover a lot. I think we originally went for 5 and had too many. Obviously, we have another AA project is the 5 steps guide that we talked about previously. So we thought maybe 5 and 10 is good to separate the two. So I don't think there's necessarily anything there. It's just to say that this is aspirational stuff, as you said, that no one person is in charge of, in control of. It's not like one person going, right, I will decide that the antinatalist community will be like this. So it's more like, as you said, trying to embody these suggestions in our behavior. It's going to be tough. We would expect it to be difficult, but as I said before, it's easy to remember the harder times than the positive ones. So if you keep the positives in mind, then I think that we definitely can. We definitely can continue to improve as a community.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would want people to take away is obviously bear in mind all those 10 things and any more things that people can think of. But one super important thing, which we did mention, but it isn't necessarily one of the 10 suggestions, is like taking initiative.
Yes.
And it's and it's just like, I can't stress more how many times I've posted a picture of like us doing something in person in London, and there's so many people saying, I wish there was something like that in my area, or blah blah blah, this sort of stuff. And it's just like, it's not going to happen unless someone makes it happen.
Yes.
And I just really want to reiterate that, in like, the community will only take shape if we make it take shape, and we as individuals can all influence in our interactions how it takes shape. And I just think it's so important to, if you want to see something happen in the community, be maybe this is a bit cringy to say, but I feel like we should almost have like an entrepreneurial mindset in the antinatalist sphere of like, we are such a small community, which is, it has its downsides, but it also means that there's so much potential and so much to be able to do, right? There's so many things that need to be done for the first time. And there are already a bunch of people in the antinatalist community that I know are, have the capacity to do this stuff. Maybe they just choose to put it elsewhere. And if that's what they want to do, that's completely fair enough. But if someone does want to see something happen in the antinatalist world, you can be the one that makes it happen. Sure, you don't have to do it on your own. You can ask people for help, blah, blah, blah. If people have ideas, feel free to email me anytime. But yeah, I just can't stress enough. Like the people need to, grab life by the balls, basically.
Exactly.
Or grab the community by the balls.
And combining entrepreneurial and grabbing people by the balls. I am demonstrating this with John Williams Sperm Donations Incorporated coming to a city centre near you.
Yeah.
They would definitely take that point, Lawrence, about how stuff only happens if we get up and do it. And you can have a pop, and if it doesn't go well, at least you try.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, things may fail, like one of the points said. Community building is hard, but you won't find out until you try doing it. And yeah, I just can't stress that enough. Cool. Okay, so at some point, this will be in a more formalized manner on the website. We don't have a specific deadline of when to do that, but we hope it's relatively soon. Again, go check out the careers page and the criticisms page. Those are two newly added pages today. Is there anything else you wanted to remind people before we finish, John?
No, I think that's everything.
Cool. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for your engagement. Thank you so much to Bovine for the super chat. And I guess we will see everyone when we see them.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Bye, bye, bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We'd also be really grateful if you could help us get the word out there by sharing this episode far and wide, as well as giving us a positive rating on whichever platform you're listening to us on. To find out more about AA, including careers advice, donation recommendations, and different ways to have a positive impact, you can go to our website at antinatalistadvocacy.org. To keep up to date with what we're up to, feel free to subscribe to our monthly newsletter and follow us on your favourite social media platforms. Links to all of the above are in the description. As always, we are hoping you will join us in our antinatalist advocacy.